Before I start, I just want to let you guys know that I stream just about every single morning over at twitch.tv/dashboard. So if you guys want to go ahead and check that out, I'll have a link for it in the description below. But in any case, let's jump right into the video. So this is a guide on how to play Maui, specifically in Conquest, and just like all of my other guides, I want to start off with how to lane with Maui. Maui is actually a really nice pressure pick, and there's a few things he has that lead to this pressure. For one, he has AoE cleave autos, meaning that he can hit multiple enemies at the same time. This is not only really good for clearing minions in lane, but it has its advantages on clearing camps too. Because of this, I always recommend doing a 3 camp start with Maui, and on top of his autos, I also actually recommend starting his 3, which is his leap. His 3 will give him some big AoE damage, as well as stunning the camps, which help to reduce the overall damage you take from them. The other thing that gives Maui a lot of pressure is that he can have 2 CC abilities level 2. After going your 3, getting your 1 next, which is your hook, allows you to be a very scary character. Aside from the setup these 2 abilities provide, they actually have a lot of base damage, with his 1 getting about 100 initial base damage alone. And this leads me into what I like to max on Maui. I actually like maxing Maui's 1 because of the sheer amount of damage it provides. It's not just a really good ability for setting up kills and starting fights, but it's also really good for poke and buff secure. Especially in the early game, maxing this ability first helps to maintain pressure. Funny enough, with how this current meta is, a lot of map play right now for support is actually sitting in dual lane for majority of the early game. This changes depending on the current meta, but at the time of this video being made, this is how it's done. The reason being is because shield buff, which is the buff that sits right outside dual lane, gives a lot of farm. On top of that, getting bastions, pressuring out the enemy tower, and even the enemy ADC's purple buff will yield your ADC a multi-level lead, even if you're splitting with them because of how much farm you're getting overall. This can also lead to an early Gold Fury pull because of all the pressure that you have. Now, of course, you still want to rotate to mid for a cheeky gank or if a big fight is happening, but you want to primarily play off duo and have control of that entire jungle side of the map. I don't recommend rotating to solo lane all that much because there's not much over there, and if you rotate at a bad time, the enemy team can just do the Gold Fury in your stead. It's completely fine to contest duo-side mid camps, especially when they turn to oracles, but your big rotation in mid lane will be around 12 minutes when the beacon spawns. Overall, what I'm trying to say is you should be primarily playing in dual lane, but also maintaining presence around that entire jungle side of the map to set up for invades, to contest neutral farm, and to help out any plays that might be happening in mid. Next, I'm going to go over team fighting with Maui. In particular, I want to dive into his ability usage so it's easier for you guys to understand how to play his abilities the best in team fights. Let's start off with his 1, otherwise called Master Fisherman. This ability should be used as his primary engage. The great thing about his 1 is that it's a ranged ability, meaning that Maui can cast it and stay pretty safe while doing so. That's why I like engaging with it so much as opposed to his jump where you're committing your main form of escape. The other thing I like about it is it's not considered a hard CC. Because it's a vortex/cripple, think of it as like Poseidon Whirlpool, wrapped in a single line. That's pretty much what Maui's hook is. This means that even if the enemy has a Magi's, Maui's 1 actually goes right through it, and it won't even proc Spear Robe either. And even if you miss, the great thing is you haven't put yourself out of position to cast it. Say like, for example, a Sobek pluck, where if you pluck in, hit, or miss, other portions of your kit are typically getting forced to keep yourself alive. So overall, it's a fantastic ability for starting a fight. Next up, we have Maui's 2, also known as Mystical Ulua. I actually consider this ability to be both defensive and aggressive. It gives both a movement speed and protection aura, so you can chase and disengage with it pretty well. When placed correctly, it can also teleport your teammate to your position and refresh the buff on them. Although, just like Kepriel, this is a two-way street. It's not just about you placing it correctly, but your teammate also having the knowledge to take it. I would pretty much toss this ability out towards your teammates almost every time it's up in a team fight. It's on a fairly short cooldown, and the buff they get from it is pretty significant. I would also use this as a way to get your teammates out of trouble or over walls. Think of Maui's 2 as you're essentially giving your teammates an extra escape. Up next, we have Maui's 3, also known as Solar Swing. This is actually a really cool ability. It provides a bit of damage, an escape, a banish, and a stun all in one. It's also a zoning tool. You can use it to zone out an area of a fight, where the enemy knows if they step into it, then they're just going to get stunned. As mentioned earlier, I usually like to use the 1 as my main form of engage on Maui, so the 3 typically comes in handy when I'm peeling for my allies. I also like to use it aggressively if my team is winning the fight, because you're not as likely to get punished jumping in at that point. You can also use your 3 and 2 cohesively together to otherwise give your teammate a sort of leap, if you will, over a wall. I think the biggest mistake I see people doing with Maui is throwing in too often, or using it too early in a fight. Again, the second it's down, you can become a vulnerable target, so you want to make sure you're using this ability as effectively and as smartly as you can. Just as a side note, a cool trick you can do with Maui is swinging over the Titan while it's aggroed on you. You won't take any damage from it, and its damage resets when you come back down. Before we get into his ult, I briefly want to touch upon Maui's passive. It's actually a super nice additional CC to everything that he has, and to use it effectively you want to space it out from your regular CC. I would try to hold the stim to auto when they're turning around to run away. This turns their body and camera towards you, which gives you way more effectiveness on it, especially when they're further away from you. So the last ability to cover is Maui's ult. This is one of the funnest ults in the game, and it has the ability to completely turn a team fight all on its own. Now, I know you want to jump the gun by ulting initially in a team fight, but in most cases this is actually the incorrect way to use it. If they have enemies with no beads and that looks super easy to ult, then go ahead and let it rip. But most of the time people are expecting the ult and they're going to be on the edge. This again is why I like initiating with Maui's 1, because I can save the ult as the fight progresses. This allows me to get better ults off in fights because I'm ulting when the enemy is distracted or focused on other things. So they end up messing up their beads, not beadsing at all, or I just end up getting really massive ults. This is typically why it's easier to hit abilities in team fights rather than in say a 1v1, because in a 1v1 their attention is directed at you, but in a team fight they're focusing on too many things and it's easier for them to mess up. Here's an example play. Here they're sieging our Phoenix, but I don't ult right away because I know they're expecting it and it's too easy to dodge. So I wait for them to come in a little, hit our Phoenix, and when their attention is split, I go ahead and nail the ult. Overall, I like to distinguish Maui's abilities into more defensive or more offensive style abilities. Maui's 1 and his ult are more offensive, more aggressive because of their engaged capabilities, whereas Maui's 2 and his 3 are more defensive because of their teammate buffing and peeling capabilities. But of course, all of his abilities can be both offensive and defensive depending on the situation. Alright everyone, that's pretty much gonna wrap up the video. Maui is by far one of the funnest characters in the entire game, and if you have barely played him, I highly recommend you get on that grind. I feel like he's a pretty underrated character currently. He's not really getting played that much in higher level comp play, but being good with this kit just allows you to influence the game so much. I hope you all enjoyed this guide, and I really hope it helps you get better with him. Just to summarize, we went over how to lane, how to play the map, and how to team fight with him by going over each of his abilities, going in depth a little bit, and learning some tips and a few tricks here and there that you can do. But in any case, take it easy everyone. Until the next video, peace out.